Roll call. The question is, what would your ideal spot be? It'd be any lake in northern Minnesota. Thomas.
I've always wanted to go to Switzerland and no apparent reason why, but I thought it'd be fun to go visit.
Gerald. Rachel.
Go to Norway. Have him there.
Well,
On a pontoon on the lake with a bunch of friends.
Bruce.
On the lake, and lake specifically.
Gerald.
Branson with our entire family.
Everyone is here and accounted for. So, additions to the agenda?
Yes, there was an addition. A resignation came in yesterday morning or this morning or yesterday, so it was added to the agenda prior to action.
Have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second by Ron. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Passes. No public comment? Consent agenda. Now I'll turn over to you.
Okay. I'll start with Cheryl with the bills and wire transfers. Anything with bills today?
No, I was able to come in and look at them all, and the only thing that stood out was we must have paid our final payment for snow plowing, and I was looking out the window thinking, snow plowing?
So, and that was a significant occurrence this year. So.
Yes. I'm so thankful we didn't need to pay another payment yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Other than that, everything was pretty much normal business.
As far as resignations and hires, and I've made a little bit of reference to this, that there was some movement from our elementary and with hires and resignations. And so those are reflective. You're also going to notice, and I'll just call out Marie Grothy's letters. This is different. We've not done this in the past, but it's a practice that I'm trying to kind of just clean up a little bit. So she is our trainer for letters. And so it's just documentation of the amount of time that she'll have to do the letters training on behalf of our district for our other teachers. So you'll notice if there are additional contracts, those are going to start to be identified on the consent agenda. So I just thought I would call that out because it is different than it's been in the past.
Okay, it's recommendation superintendent to approve the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Make a motion.
I'll second it.
Thomas, Rachel, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it passes. Communication items, starting with the superintendent.
Okay. I linked in a report for you today. I'm going to pull that up and we're going to look at a couple of different things. I try to, periodically over the course of the year, share what the student enrollment is. And so I'm going to pull this one up. Actually, I'm going to change tabs here after I make this a little bit bigger. So I think this is really just kind of a nice summary that helps us to see. Let me change this so that anybody that's watching is able to see that a little bit more. Okay, so this document really does show kind of over the course of the year how there's movement, and I'm not going to make it super big because I think it makes it hard to see. But the red is when there's a loss, and a green is when there's an addition. So that first column you'll see is it's reported every 2 weeks. So we've got the 15th of September. Oh, I don't want that to continue to show up, but we have the 15th of September, the 1st of October, 15th of October, and so on. These first two lines, the very, very first one is our preschool, and then the second line is our HK, which means it's a kindergartner who is identified as a student with a disability. And so those two numbers are differentiated because they have a different funding associated with them. But when you come down and look, so for our kindergarten numbers, it's important to take a look at that. That would include your HK, which is that second line, and your first line, which is your kindergarten. I'm going to try to move this over so that we can look at that a little bit more. There we go. So the The enrollment numbers are broken out based on funding. When you get to 7-12, there's a different weighting, which is why they're broken out differently. The summary of your preschool through 12th grade is at the bottom. And you'll see again where we've had an increase as a green, or a red is a loss. And then on the bottom, way down at the bottom, I have just our K-12 bodies. Okay, so it's just kind of a summary and a snapshot of our enrollment throughout the course of the year. One of the questions that I know we've talked a little bit about is about open enrollment and what does that mean for our district? And so that's really the next piece of data that I just want to spend a real quick second taking a look at. And that, let me share this with people to look at too, because this is really I think this is interesting, and it's actually something I'm pretty proud of. So cumulatively, we have a gain of students from our loss, open enrollment out, and our students coming in. So what does that mean, and where do they go? So Paynesville Area Schools residents attending elsewhere, there's 157 students. Okay, well that's more than 139. However, it's important to look at 33 of our students are placed, which means that our district has either had them go to an alternative learning center, or they've been placed in a special education program, or the student has been placed they've been receiving like a treatment, a care and treatment type setting in a different district that's served by or serves a setting. So that's 33 students. We have 20 students that are attending online. And so that's another one that's a little bit tricky, because when we weren't able to provide our online programming after COVID, we had some students that opted to stay and attend Minnesota Virtual Academy, some of the Connections Academies, just the virtual online schools. And so we have 20 students that have done that. So then I think the other piece is that's kind of the apples to apples is 104 open enrolled students. So students that are going to our neighboring school districts or elsewhere. Okay. So then let's take a look at
Homeschool.
that. Does not include homeschool. Nope, this is just open enrollment. Okay. Now let's take a look at our non-resident students that are attending Paynesville area schools. So we have 39 students that we are bringing in from our surrounding communities. So they're enrolling into our school district. And this is the breakdown of where they come from. We have one from Wilmer, one from St. Cloud, one from McRae, 2 from Kimball, 3 from McCrory, 9 from Albany, 12 from Melrose, 15 from BBE, 20 from ACGC, 32 from Eden Valley, and 43 from New London Spicer. So cumulatively, that's kind of where I look at a placement I don't count those as, I guess, I don't see those as open enrolling out. And I also don't, I don't look at the 20 online as a open enroll per se, because they're choosing to just stay and access an online education, not going to our neighboring communities, right?
We didn't have anything to do with that. That
Those
was
are-
that's COVID result.
Some of that is COVID, yep. And I think, so one thing that has changed legislatively is that, you know, and we're gonna have to see what that implication is for us, is some of those requirements for online programming are different moving into the next school year. So that might be an area that we have that we can capitalize on. I'm not sure yet. We're gonna see what that means for us, but it was something that was positive that I saw in the legislation. So I wanted to share this information with you because I think it's interesting to see. I don't have a great way to determine where our 104 kids go, which districts. There's a multitude, there's 2 different reports that I pulled. And unfortunately, the one that has our students going elsewhere, it's not a super easy way to see how many go to, so I can't do a side by side comparison of like Wilmer, St. Cloud, McRae. But it's still good information for us to have.
We don't get the per pupil dollars for those students that are say online.
No, unless they're a concurrent enrollment, if they take some classes at our site and online, then we would get a portion of. Yep.
But they are able to participate in our sporting activities.
Not necessarily.
No, it really depends.
Okay.
So This also does not take into account our post-secondary enrollment options, which would be kids that are enrolled in a college class.
Right.
And it also, to Bruce's point, it also does not include our homeschool students, and our homeschool students are absolutely able to participate in our, and a lot of them, we do have a dual enrollment. Well, they'll come in and maybe take a music or a foreign language or an elective course. And then there are some students that participate in our activities.
Yep.
Feedback.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, some of those online are actual schools.
They're a full, it's a full
Once they
program.
enroll in that school, then they, Gotcha.
Do we have access to a number as far as in our district, how many kids are homeschooled, or is that something that
Yep, I can
we'll
get that.
never know an answer on?
No, I can get that. Miranda tracks that, so I can get that for us. Yep, I could add that to this chart.
They have to be registered. I don't know, register with the school, or they have to be in touch with you.
They are in touch with me. Yep.
They are required to.
Yes. Yep. A student has to be either enrolled in school or part of a homeschool. If they're, it's the compulsory attendance law. Yep. So, I can add the, homeschool to this information.
I'm curious.
Yep. Sure. Okay.
If I roll back to the totals on your first chart, where did we start and where did we end up? I numbered in something, I didn't see the far.
Yep, let me,
Positive.
I'll look at my, I printed,
Bottom of that chart.
yeah, I printed that out. Just give me a second. Because it's to our for me to see. We started at, on the 15th of September, we had 904, and on the 1st of June, we had 915.
That's a big deal. There was a time that some of us talked about it. If we could have had a growth of 1 is all we were looking for. That's a nice growth that we can have, because growth is basically, I'm just gonna say my perspective is, people are seeing what we have to offer here. I think we should brag a little more than we do and tell people a little more about what's going on here. But at the same time, they're seeing what we do. If that number increases, it can offset our referendum issue.
And
So it's a part that we have, has nothing to do with anything else, but if every grandparent and parent or relatives are thinking they want to come to a school, if we could get them to come to this school, it would work. Plus, it will make the school run really good.
the other thing that is important, and you can look at, and I zoomed in to make the, so you can see, and I just looked at the June 1st. You'll see that our junior class, our 11th graders, is 84 students. And you'll notice that's our largest class. Okay, so when our seniors graduate next year, that's gonna be our biggest, which is, it is.
Kind of ebbs and
data
flows a
point.
little bit, I
It
think,
does.
because we saw that before.
Yep.
I'm not so panicked about that. The idea is we're on the right path.
I think we're on the right path, and I think that the other piece in my mind, Bruce, when I look at that, is our open enrollment information. The number of students that we continue to have coming in, versus the students that are going elsewhere. And I think, let's continue to take a look at, how we can draw opportunities for families that are homeschooling and that they maybe want to come and take portions of their day with us. That's still student aid that we get, and they get a dual enrollment. So there's some great stuff happening. Yep, I agree. Revenues and expenditures, I can pull those up. There's not a lot, so there's not a lot of significant changes. But we are nearing the end of our first little summary here. So this one is our revenues sheet. So you'll see as we get to May, we've got year to date, our current versus year to date is a little bit under from a revenues perspective. But when we look at our percent of the budget received, you'll see it's 80%. So we're expecting some revenues to come in yet. Similarly, when we look at our expenditures, and again, if you look at those tabs and you you scroll across the bottom, that first tab, July 1st, always has the definitions of what's included in each of the breakdowns. So just as a reminder, if anybody's ever looking at that, that's where you can find what's included. And then taking a look at our expenditures. Again, we brought in our revised budget in February, and you'll see that our May 31st, 22-23, we're still looking at about 76% of our expenditures. June is a busy month for revenues and expenditures. That's so you'll see that May is, as we closed out May, there's going to be some finalization in June. So that is what I have for my administrative report today. Committee wise, any committee information? There's not been a lot of meetings, a lot of negotiations meetings have been pushed back just because of timing of things. And I'm not surprised by that. And that's not unique to Paynesville area schools, just to let everybody know.
So I have a question. So the state with all their stuff and their funding for us and all that, is that in place well enough that you're able to get that into our budget? Or do they have something that is pending on when we would actually get paid?
No,
It's pretty solid, so you can put it in there.
our projections. So as we move into the budget agenda, yep, we've calculated what we're predicted to get. Yep. Okay.
And we'll get that July 1st, or is that where we start the projection?
We're gonna look at that in
Still look at that.
Yeah, new business is coming up.
Yep.
Okay, then let's move on to old business. We have policies to approve tonight.
Correct.
Yeah, but we'll be asking. So,
And I did not receive any comments in the district office or for review.
we have gone over these a couple times now, so unless there's any questions, we could move ahead to approve them.
Make a motion, we approve the policies.
Motion, is there a second?
I can second.
Thomas, seconds, all in favor, say aye. Opposed, and the policies are approved. That brings us to new business and preliminary budget.
Okay, so I'm gonna pull up the budget presentation, and I'll share that with the screen as well. So one of the things that you asked me last time when I presented this information was what the status of the fund balance was, and so let me. Oh, jeepers, slideshow. I do this every time I'm
Right
sitting
next to
watching
share on
this.
the top.
Right next to slideshow, that big button that says
Big one, that's
slideshow.
slideshow.
I do this every time I present this document or a slide. Okay. So a couple of things. So nothing has changed here. To answer your questions, in our general unappropriated funds that are coming in, we have taken into account the estimated money that is going to be included for the 4% for our on the formula. We have taken into account the funding that's going to come as a cross subsidy reduction. Those figures have been allocated in. We have also taken into account where we have expenditures that were contingent upon having a position. So as for instance, I talked about 2 different positions. Well, I'll just get to those in just a minute here, but we've taken into account if there's you have to do something to get the funds. We've taken that have to do it to get the funds into account. Okay. One of the questions that was asked of me at our last meeting was to have a kind of a snapshot of our fund balance and where that comes in. So I did add in that in 18-19 is when the fund balance was at a positive, and then you'll see from 19-20 up until this fiscal year, we have been in a deficit spending, and you'll see those numbers have gone from 145,000 up to 294,000. Now, 22-23 and 23-24, those have an asterisk because those are estimates. Those are not final, and we never count them as final until the audit is complete. Okay, and the audit is complete in about December. It's presented to the board usually in December. Okay, but I think it's important to remember that and not only have we been in a deficit budget, we've made reductions, right? So I think those are things that have all been part of kind of the story along the way. And I think it's important to take a look at those deficit budgets and know that that kind of can happen and how that can happen. Okay. So are there any questions on that? I know that was a request of the board to have that pulled together. So I just
Deficit years are just something that happens because when you have that bond or we issue
random.
a
Yeah.
referendum, it goes up. And so we have years that it's one way and then you're going to ride the curve down. So it's not like it's not something that you're not going to deal with or we're never going to see. It's always going to happen. We just have to watch that curve because there was a time we were curving on zero for a long time and there was nothing.
Problem with that curve is when it starts going downhill, you can speed up.
Oh yeah, it's exponential usually and so it goes pretty fast.
It does go faster when you're spending down versus building up. Yep. So in the assumptions that I'm walking through, I have not changed anything. So when I talked about the additional revenues that are coming in, so there is revenue that is assigned for to offset the cost of a media specialist. There's also money that is assigned to do some student support aid. That money has been built in with the assumption that we are going to fill that position with the requirement as such, okay? You'll see that the expenditures, there weren't any changes. So again, just as some of the reminders, the things that we built in, we knew what our health insurance premium increase was, so that was built in. We also know what our TRA contributions are, so those are built in as well. So our salaries and the salaries and other are kind of a breakdown. And again, it's just a reminder that we are in the business of people. Our people are our service, and that's why our budget is made up the way it is. Okay. This is also taking into account that kindergarten is going to run with 4 sections as opposed to 3. That is one of our hires as well. So there was some movement throughout the elementary with just different positions. And so that position we were able to fill, which is exciting. Food service, you're going to see nothing has changed there. Once we have the rates, those will be set. And then I'm anticipating we should have that before we set the fee schedule for next year. But, that we haven't received that yet.
We have a cost associated with that.
With
We had people paying fees for lunch. Now we don't. I don't see any funds coming in.
so
Are we gonna run it?
well, we'll still have, so that's one of the things that's coming up. So we'll talk a little bit about lunch, our lunch accounts. Maybe I had it in there on that.
Well, let's wait
second.
until we get to your part-time.
Oh, you know what? I have it in there. So like a second chance breakfast is cash only. Okay. And that's partially because, and we talked a little bit about this at the work session too, that when families aren't putting money into their lunch accounts because there's not a requirement to pay for lunch, is that going to essentially run up a balance for families that they are in a negative when they aren't putting money into lunch accounts? That's one of the questions that when we look at our extra entree, because every child will get a breakfast and a lunch. There are many of our students at the secondary that will take an extra entree. So they'll come through and they just love our chicken sandwiches. So they have 2. Well, then they have to pay for that second one, right? So that we've not made a final determination if they'll use their lunch account for that or if they'll pay cash for that. There's pros and cons to both sides.
Well,
But
my understanding with the free lunches, the kids are just gonna come and they're gonna have a basic lunch for nothing. Right? And it
Yes.
should, and I understand that should include everybody, correct?
correct.
And last year, we had a group of people that were paying for lunch. This year, we're not gonna have that because they don't have to pay anymore. My curiosity
The
is
state pays.
what,
So the state
State pays.
No, so the
State
state-
pays that.
so the state is matching what they used to pay us?
So here, yes, so here's the way that's gonna work is, students will still be identified as, if a student was on what was called direct certification, which meant that they were identified as a student that would receive a free lunch or a reduced lunch. They were part of the federal program. That still will be part of the process. The students that are identified with free and reduced get paid for out of the federal funding. All the other students are going to get paid for out of the state hopper. So it all comes into the district. So it's a wash for us, but where it comes from, some of it comes.
It is giving us a
some of it
fixed
comes-
number for the amount that we're not going to receive from
Yes.
parents previously.
Yeah, so we will not see a loss there, but we won't see revenue either. No, it's just gonna be a break even.
And I think what Michelle's mentioning here is the catches, the extra entrees, or the second chance breakfast, those are not covered by state.
Correct.
And that's okay, but they would be paid for if they get it and they're not paid for it. So that's kind of a wash all in itself. But does that last forever? Or is this something that they putting a 2-year program in and that becomes the counselors?
Nothing's forever.
Next 1 year, 1 year, wait and see.
I'm not
Wait till the
I'm
next
not
one.
entirely sure how to answer that because I don't know. I mean, the legislature built it into the
So it's not
2-year.
limited to them dates at the moment.
They did not put dates on
It
it.
did not put an end date on it.
Yep.
They did not put an end date on it.
They can always pull it.
You know, if it becomes an extremely expensive program, who knows? So, but this was a significant priority. If you remember, this passed really early in the legislative session so that it could be ready for fall and implemented in the fall. So this passed outside of the omnibus bill for education and any of the other labor bills or things like that. So, that was done early. Yep. So some other, just as a reminder, and we talked a little bit about the reductions that have been applied and anticipated of the deficit budget. None of these have been built back in, as an add back, but, so those were followed through, as we began our budget discussions in March. Some variability and, things to consider. You'll see nothing changed there. I think some of the things that, again, we really did want to build that fourth kindergarten teacher back in. It is important to remember the change from our graduating class to our kids coming in. It's not a life shaker, but it does make a big difference when you talk about a 2% increase in the second year and you're looking at approximately $194,000 difference. So it's things to take into account. Other things that we've been looking at, and Gerald, you'll see this in July where we start talking about the facilities planning and what does that look like and how does that align to the timing over the course of the next years. Okay. So those are all, nothing has changed in that, in that presentation or that discussion, as we kind of look to approve the budget. So the secondary document that you're going to see, is this document, and it is linked in the presentation, but this is just a little bit more detailed breakdown of each of those areas. So I'll make it a little bit bigger before I share it. So hopefully if anybody's watching, they don't have to get seasick watching me zoom in and zoom out. Okay. So this is the document that is kind of it's considered our approved budget document right now. This is in draft. But then this is what we will revise midway through the year to make any changes based on any variability. But our general fund is going to be it's all of our main expenditures that are not out of a designated area. Our assigned funds are funds that we can't use cross-categorically. I can't take money from the designated for staff development and put it into, that money can't be used to pay a food service debt, okay? QComp money is designated for QComp. That money can't be taken and applied to our admin assistants, for example, to offset their salaries. So those are just a couple of examples. You'll also see some of the restricted accounts for safe schools money, for example. That's one of our levy dollars that comes in that has a very specific amount, a specific tag of what you can use it for. Those are all accounted for and designated as such. Food service is a fund that we've talked a little bit about. Again, our food service fund has, there are expenditures if we need to do, buy a new freezer, for example, that can come out of the food service fund. But we could not use our food service fund to build our concession stand, for example. You know, you can't, it's restricted and designated. Our community ed, we have again been working on spending down some of that fund balance, but it is very purposeful. There's been the expenditures for our fitness center equipment. There's a designated money that's been set aside to be used and applied toward the preschool playground. So there are some things that are, again, those are set aside and those are designated. So that's just an example of kind of those yellows that are called apart and set aside. But the number that we often watch and pay the most attention to is that top line, which is our general fund. And that's where you're going to see that fund balance that oftentimes has been a negative and in the red. And this year we are anticipating a budget being able to build back into that fund balance. So Rick, that's what I have for the budget presentation.
Okay, any questions? Concerning the budgets? Okay, then we'll move to B, memberships.
We need a motion and a second.
Oh, we got them on. Not too far. Yeah, a motion to accept.
Make a motion to accept it.
On. Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Now,
Cheryl.
memberships.
All right. So our memberships, I've only received 2 invoices thus far. So I do expect that we'll have a couple more of these memberships, but this is our MREA, the Minnesota Rural Education Association. So, again, this is a resource that serves our school district through advocacy and legislative influence. MREA really focuses on rural school districts and what it is that is unique to us in relation to other more metro school districts. I was actually at a legislative summary meeting yesterday, and MREA was there and presented, and it was interesting. Their data is that 80% of the school districts are in rural Minnesota, and 80% of the student population is in the metro. So it's just an interesting kind of disconnect, right? So we have unique issues. And so that's been one of the resources that's been nice to have at our disposal. And then the other invoice that is attached, or the approval contract that I'm looking for approval for, is the Minnesota School Board Association. That's been we utilize that service and support quite heavily, to be honest with you. And so I think that's also a worthwhile membership to have.
Just out of curiosity on the School Board Association, if we weren't a member of that, would we be allowed to even go to any of their, so we use them extensively. I mean,
There is not a school district in the state of Minnesota that is not a member.
Just on the policies
On
and
the
the
policy.
suggestions and keeping us out of all the legal issues that are so hard to unwind. They are excellent. We should be members of both of these.
Yes.
Yeah.
The other 2 that I'm expecting is C, which is Schools for Equity and Education. And then the other one that I'm expecting is the Resource Training and Solutions. Those are the other 2 that I'm expecting that I just haven't received the invoice for them yet. So last year they were all approved at the same time, but those 2 haven't been received yet.
And so the rural education was one that we just added a few years ago.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, any questions? Is there a motion to
So moved.
Cheryl move that
I'll do the second.
Bruce second. We accept membership in these for the year. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Certification of updated district population estimate.
So, when the population, is recertified from 2020, there was an increase. And so this resolution allows us to adopt the changed, the changed census number. And you'll see that our census, would go from 5,985 to 6,218. This is for our Paynesville area school district boundaries. Okay, so that just kind of gives you a point of reference to what this is. And this is really used it's used in the calculation of our community education funding. So the resolution that would be introduced is to certify the population estimate for 23 payable 24 for Independent School District 741.
Any questions? So we need a motion and then a roll call.
So we need someone to introduce the resolution first.
Somebody want to look at that? Did you bring that up, everyone? Resolution?
I make a motion, so I have to read.
Yeah, resolve it. I think. Is that what you want?
Yep, so introduce the following resolution for adoption, so you can read the resolution if you'd like.
Yep, certifying that the population estimate for the 2023 payable 2024 levy of Independent School District 741, whereas the Independent School District 741 has experienced an increase in population from the 2020 census. Keep reading this, correct?
Yep.
Figure of 5,985 to the current census figure of 6,218 as determined by the state demographer. Be it resolved by the school board of Independent School District 741 that the census figure of 6,218 be certified to the state demographer for approval of use in the 2023 payable 2024 revenue calculations. For the adoption of the foregoing resolution was duly seconded by.
I'll second it.
Second, Thomas. On moves, Thomas seconds.
And then it's a roll call.
A roll.
Ron,
Aye.
Thomas,
Aye.
Rachel, aye, Cheryl,
Aye.
Aye.
Gerald,
Aye.
Passes. Okay. Okay, the recommendation from the Board of Education meeting. So statute chapter 13D.03. We have a motion to close the board.
I'll make the motion meeting 38 PM.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We move to closed session then.
So Rick, then we'd be on to letter E.
Recommendation superintendent to open the Board of Education meeting. Is there a motion?
I make motion.
Second.
Whoa, that's me. Hold on.
Time it.
And at 7:42 PM.
Thomas made the motion. Cheryl, did you?
Yep.
Second. All in favor of open the meeting?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we are open and review upcoming meetings. Reminder that July 11th, that's our only meeting for the month of July, right?
Yes, so we have,
So that will be a regular meeting.
July 11th is our only meeting, and that'll be, yes, our,
Enjoy July.
by July.
Where there may not be a paraprofessional meeting.
May or may not be a pair, and I will, I expect to hear from them at the end of the week.
Okay.
All right,
Is there any other business? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
A second.
Carol, all in favor, stand up.
And the time is
At 43.
43.